We're going to take a look at Frank Turek's hot take on the difference between Roman Catholicism and evangelical Protestantism, particularly in terms of what he calls authority, and then I'll offer my response on the other side.
That book. Now, probably the nub of all this, if you wanted to really get down to what's the difference, the major difference between Roman Catholics and, say, evangelical Protestants, is who is the authority? Is the authority the scriptures? Or is the authority the scriptures plus tradition plus church councils plus whatever the Pope says? I'm going to say it's the scriptures.
Okay, so that's Turek's contrast. He says, who is the authority? That's a little weird, right? Not what is the authority, because he describes who as the Bible, personalizing the Bible. Maybe that's just some odd idiosyncrasy in terms of his speech, but it did strike me as odd. Now, the main difference there is he says, okay, the authority is either the Bible or it's the Bible plus tradition and councils and popes. The problem is Turek doesn't tell us what he means by the authority. So, what does he actually mean by that? It's ambiguous. This could be epistemological in terms of, in other words, what is the source of our doctrine? Is it the Bible, or is it the Bible plus councils, traditions, popes? And Turek says, well, it's the Bible. If that's what he means by authority, where do you get doctrine from? Well, he's clearly wrong and it's false. You don't just get doctrine from the Bible. We are always informed by ecclesial reading traditions. Whether you're a Roman Catholic or a Baptist or a low church, a Bible church person, you call yourself part of a Bible church or Anglican, Lutheran, anything else, you come to the Bible itself informed by a particular way of reading, interpreting, and applying the Bible. And that is an extra biblical framework that you've received from a reading tradition, typically into which you were inculcated or formed. So I was raised Pentecostal, and so I was taught to read the Bible through the lens of a Pentecostal. And what that meant was that I looked for speaking in tongues, charismatic gifts, the spirit baptism, and a particular interpretation of those concepts given to me by the Pentecostal tradition. I may not have had a pope, I may not have had a official council, but I clearly had a reading tradition into which I was inculcated or into which I was raised. And the exact same thing is true of Turek. The problem with many evangelical Protestants like Turek is they seem to be just unaware that they've been informed and formed by a reading tradition that they then bring to the text, and their understanding of doctrine emerges through the interplay of that reading tradition. You could call it a theory, if you like, of that theory as it reads and engages with the text. Roman Catholics are much more aware of that. And to that degree, they're more correct in their understanding of theological method. Although, as a Protestant, I think a Wesleyan framework is a helpful one to correct Frank Turek's reductionistic understanding of the role of Bible in terms of authority in Scripture. Now, there's another way to interpret authority, and that could be that the ultimate ground of something, not just the way you come to learn about doctrine, but the ultimate authority, the basis for the doctrine itself. Where does that ultimately come back to? And there, in terms of a sort of metaphysical concept of authority, the answer is not the Bible, it's surely God, right? God is our ultimate authority. The scriptures are authoritative derivatively to the extent that they witness to God and that they've been appropriated by God or used by God or inspired by God to be theopneustos or divine speech for us. So whether you interpret Frank as talking about authority in terms of knowledge or epistemology or a more metaphysical sense of authority, he's wrong on either account. Now, I'm not saying Roman Catholics are quote unquote right. That would be a subject for another debate or another topic, another video. And I'm not a Roman Catholic. I do think that Catholics are more correct on this than Frank Turek, and that's something.